First, I would like to thank the producers of the show for getting us all here together in Los Angeles today. Bring in my brother whom I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. And my father, to whom I haven't spoken now in 17 years. And my oldest son, whom I hadn't spoken to now in 21 or 22 years. I just wanted to thank him because I've just got so many people to talk to now. And plus, since we've been here, me talking to him, it reminded me why I never did like him. Oh, and also, before we get going, for the many people in our viewing audience who keep writing in and saying, when are we going to, have a special? Or a special offer. No, a special offer. And I'd like to say never. That's when. Never. All right? Oh, and also, I guess, for us here in Bozeman, in the wonderful state of Norway, here in that ever popular Crimean Republic of Uzbekistan. Well, I'm sure speaking for all of us, it seems fitting this time of year to give thanks. I mean, just to think about that we should be thankful, I guess, for living here, because when you start thinking that just to the southwest of us, their past illustrious combination spiritual and political leader was a man who wrote descriptions of how you could morally, socially acceptable, have sex with a goat. And then right to our southeast is a country whose leader claims to be king, and he wears glasses and has claims to be God, and he has diabetes and wears glasses. And then just to our immediate south, of course, is one of the largest countries in the world, whose last president, kind of person I always wanted to, I'm sure like you, wanted to live under, a man who every morning had a nice glass of urine to start the day. Maybe that's what I get for not having spoken to my... What if I told you, what if I described man, or how about three aspects of man, and starting off as a springboard, just contemporary, ordinary, serious, scientific shit, crap, stuff, information stuff. How about three new descriptions, using some of their own ammo, which they'll never get anywhere with, they'll never shoot anything. But three descriptions, maybe the ordinary, the insane, and then the extraordinary aspects of human consciousness. I guess that about covers it, doesn't it? Three. Well, if we go back to my thing again, of the human nervous system and the ever popular level of consciousness, the human brain itself, before we get into anything esoteric or metaphorical. And I was going to bring up as a springboard just quite ordinary, contemporary, acceptable, physiological, scientific info, which that's not the point. I'm not bringing it up to prove anything because it never proves anything. But it is just a good place for us to start that appears to have some valid everyday sanity. And that is, for some years now, they have been able, through no great trick, stuff you can get at Radio Shack, and willing volunteers, of course, that it can be found that in the nervous system of man, going up, passing through all of the earlier stages of man, through the limbic system and getting up to the cortex, is we have demonstrative, measurable electrochemical energy signals. They're coming from here up to the level of consciousness. We have I think their figures are millions more at any given second than the mind, the brain, they call it the mind / brain probably, and then parentheses, question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark, into parentheses. But their measurable figure, if I remember, is in excess of 1 million. At any given second, signals coming in. Of course, they're coming in the body everywhere, and you're feeling all sorts of things. You're keeping your equilibrium, and you're keeping your body temperature at a certain thing, whether you're hot or cold. But what interests us is up here, of course. But you have, coming into the brain itself, into the cerebral cortex, you have many, 1 million more inputs, signals coming in at any second than the mind / brain processes. I guess you can fill in can process if you'd like to. If you ever watch PBS, you'd probably go, well, add can. Add can yourself. Look at it operationally. You have many more coming in than you do process. One more time, we're not trying to prove anything because I've already told you all of this, and there's ways to look at it that have some meaning, but I'm using what sounds to be that we walked in off the street like ordinary sane people to start with, and using good, valid, scientifically sound information from which to stand on a high board and then leap off into the great abyss of what the hell happened. 3 aspects I was going to use: ordinary consciousness, just ordinary people, and then insanity through the ordinary people's definition, not ours, because we're not ordinary enough to define insanity, are we? No. And extraordinary states of consciousness. Let's start, how about the insane to start with? We have had medicine, psychology, all right, medicine / psychology to keep up our indebtedness to the world's scientific and intellectual community. Spend as much time dealing with what seems to be pathological problems as they do the nature of man. In case you've never noticed. If you go to study psychology, you're going to major in, if you just take undergraduate courses in psychology, what are they going to teach you mostly? Abnormal psychology. And if you try to point out, wait a minute, I wanted to sign up for a psychology course and you keep teaching abnormal psychology, they'll look at you like you're what? Abnormal. Sit down, you freshman, you don't know anything. And of course, if you decide to major in it, by the time you get into graduate school, you're still studying abnormal psychology, but you have forgotten. And so then you're okay, you're part of the crowd. But insanity, they spend as much time, by the way, they do have an excuse. They have had it whilst trying to study brain functions itself, is that many times they will say that it's fortuitous, serendipitous in favor of science that we have had so many people with severe brain damage from accidents, or the kind of operations they were doing for a while to treat epilepsy. That is, of having people who had mental problems so in that, as they put it, that they could, with a certain kind of moral impunity, could go inside of their skull instead of a poor cat or baboon. Of course, they quit doing it with baboons because baboons used to wreck the place. But in the animals that would put up with it, couldn't do any better. Instead of doing that, they now, what they put it, the majority, I'm sure they've said this, of what they know about the human brain, they learn through the good fortune. The good fortune of having people who had the bad fortune to have serious brain problems, physical damage, and therefore they could study the problem. Like someone who cannot see the letter Z, or someone who cannot recognize a woman over 5'2". If they see her, she looks like a discarded Christmas tree. Just something insane, but they go, aha, now we're getting somewhere because the person's already damaged. So that they don't take in some poor volunteer off the street or say, homeless people stay here for the night, and then try to perform strange experiments on them. Used to, science could do that back in the good old days. And then, I don't know, it's the world of information and people got too hip, and there are those around who now seem to take exception to doing these kind of dangerous experiments on people, unless, of course, perhaps you're a Republican or an accountant. But as far as ordinary people, So they find it to be a stroke of good fortune to have so many people with actual physical problems to the nervous system, particularly up here, because then they can say, hey, we didn't do it. The guy was in a car wreck. And I mean, so we're trying to help him, but as long as we're in there, hey, Dr. Hubert and Bubba, come over here, look in this guy's brain, and let's poke around and see what, if we find anything new. That was thrown in free. It's considered that most of what they admitted, they stated, of what they know about the human mind/brain is from studying those human/brains, mind/ that are sick/ pathological/ damaged, bruised a bit, etc. Think about that. You don't want to, eh? Well, just the next time you think, well, I wonder what science knows now about the human mind, and you go read a book, they think, well, I learned something about the way my brain operates. And the main thing they know, as they put, about how your brain operates is by studying people whose brain does not operate correctly. But so you got to notice how life attacks itself, though. Nobody else laughs at this. It's not an attack. They say, well, it's our good fortune because knowing how when it doesn't operate properly, when it doesn't operate properly, we can learn how it should operate. Which sounds great, unless you think about that. But at any rate, insanity. They have, for as long as men have been writing, they have been trying to define insanity. They're trying to define it today. And notice that there is no consensus whatsoever on what constitutes insanity. Derangement, people suffering from delusions. They can exemplify it. They can pick out someone and say, well, come up here on stage and tell us what you did today. And the person says, well, I just I just got back from Mars. And they do all that, and people go, well, there you are. But that's the same basis, by the way, in having good hard scientific data on the human brain by studying people's brains who is damaged. It's the same thing, in case you never thought about it. But they would say, well, here's an example. And you couldn't say, well, wait a minute, you still don't know what insanity is. Then they've got you because they look at you like you're insane. Because they'd say, wait a minute, you mean you don't think this guy who said that he just, the reason he was late to come here tonight was his flight from Mars was late, and that's why he was late? You don't think that's insane? And then you got to go, well, yeah. They go, okay. But that doesn't define it. All right, here we go. Here's the point. It is taken to be, putting words in their mouth, which they would agree with, they wouldn't even try to do it. Ordinary mind would not try to do it. But if you tried to talk to psychiatry, to the institutions of psychology and psychiatry, and say, well, just in general, what do you feel, what do you think is the nature of insanity? Just in the widest possible sense. People who are just not right. What is it? Then the best view that I'm sure that they would give would be they'd have to say, well, it's usually a combination, or it could be. If you want a complete potential answer, it's on the basis of probable or possible genetic brain damage, perhaps lifestyles lived prior to our diagnosis, that were not conducive to mental health, drugs, alcohol. It could even be other childhood diseases, postnatally, smallpox, etc. could have had an effect. Or it could be undiagnosed epilepsy. And it certainly nowadays, they would include, most certainly, very likely, but most certainly could possibly include unconscious, subconscious traumas from childhood, or even during one's adult life, like the loss of a wife, a loved one. That all of these things, we've got a full menu here. The point is now, they would say, is we have to be able to zero in, perhaps refine it more. But I want you to get that. I'm speaking for them. That's including everything. That is that there is something specific in the person. The person that we're talking about who is insane, who is not normal. That there is something in there. And it's got a range. It's got to fall within that sort of range, does it not? Between physical, inherited, or genetic damage to the nervous system. They were born with a lump on their brain. They were born that way. All the way from that to psychological traumas. And not excluding either end, but somewhere in there it covers all possibilities, does it not? And you'd have to say, well, yeah. But still, the point they do not see is they are attributing, or they're looking at the patient as being that patient, the person under discussion, a person, that there is something in the person's experience. Are you ready? I will describe, not define. Screw that. That's too easy. That's a one-liner. I'll save that for another night. I will describe very shortly what insanity is, using their own, as I opened up, their own scientific view. Let us just say that we have, that sounds like a lot. Let's say that in a given second, I'll double guess them. I'll be charitable. Instead of 1,000,000 signals coming in, what we say 100,000. Let's be nice about it. That right now there are 100,000 electrochemical signals almost simultaneously. It defies any sense of time, ordinary time, sequential time, that are coming into your brain in the same way that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands coming into your, forget just the brain, but the body itself, of which you give no note. You cannot take note of every small change in, quote, the environment out there. The temperature since we've been standing here, since I've been talking, could have dropped or raised, let's say, an 1/8 of a Fahrenheit. Yeah. 1/8 of a degree. But that's not enough, let's assume, for anyone to notice. Perhaps if you were doing nothing else, if you were in solitary confinement somewhere, stripped naked, sitting there, been there for months, nothing to do, then you might start noticing such as that. That might be the highlight of the day, is when the temperature changes. Well, to do something to stimulate the body, and which will then stimulate the mind to give you something to do, right? But right now, plus there are noises. I mean, it's no secret there are noises now coming from God knows what that is, from neon lights, from all sorts of things going. There's noises outside. I talk, I make hand gestures. Sometimes you might notice. Sometimes you wonder, is he doing a satire? Is he actually, all sorts of things. Your chair. 1/8 of your right buttock is trying to go to sleep from the position you're in. All right, it's simply that. That is, there's no doubt about it, it's non-mystical. In the same way, so you're getting more signals than you have need to process. Or you can process. We're supposed to be big boys and girls now. Then you do. Screw the rest of it. That's speculation. That's a hobby. You simply are getting more than you do process. So up here, taking their figure and being charitable, 100,000 every second coming in. Now you're trying to listen to me, let's assume. Plus, you may be having your own thoughts. Something I said reminds you of something else. Something I said you thought contradicts something I'd already said. Or I said something that contradicts something you just thought. But now you're supposed to have some notion of what's going on up here. Now, even though you're awake, you still got the dream running. I'm sorry. It's still running. So, you're getting in, let's say, 100,000 constantly, every second, every moment, incoming signals, and you are only processing a few. It's not open to speculation. If you think it's open to speculation, then you have wasted all your time here. You got no idea what's going on up here. You're stood down in the basement chasing rats. Much less, I hope you don't get hold of a book by that spiritual leader. Never mind. Insanity. The reason I went through all of doing the hand gestures and doing the scope all the way from physical, genetic brain damage to invisible psychological traumas, and saying it did not exclude either end, and that had to include everything, which I'm not arguing that. To their view, it does. But they still look at is that there is damage going on, or has gone on, and is still either extant or he's suffering the aftermath of it, of some problem. But what if it's this? The current, the signals coming in to everybody. Everybody, here they come. And I won't try to do them all, but let's consider 100,000. And you can only do 2 or 3 constantly. Notice how charitable I'm being to everybody. 2 or 3. Well, we can be realistic. Maybe 2.5 things that some of you can almost do simultaneously in your head. So we have, It's getting up here and you're getting like 2.5. 2. So that leaves 98,000 signals coming in. Just signals. Now I'm taking their view. Just signals. We don't know what. Just signals. Insanity. Insanity is people taking in 2.5 constantly out of the 100,000 different signals. Then the majority's brain, which is the sane brain, of the ones they're taking in. Did you think that the opening was just a joke of me pointing out, how nice it is to live in a sane place where at least we don't have a leader that gets up every morning, the prime minister of our country, and publicly will drink a glass of piss, and you think, well. Or another leader right down the road, another great country, one of the strongest tyrants of his time, authored with his name on it and passed it around. Some of the etiquette and how to go about without offending society and your God. How to have sex with animals. And you people are supposed to be good enough not to go, well, that just shows the cultural differences. Screw all that. We're talking about human beings on this planet. You could say, well, all right, if we're not going to call it just some sort of cultural difference, call it what it is from an ordinary man's viewpoint. Us ordinary people standing here, us decent people right here in Finland right now, and you know that 500 miles from here is a country that they think it's all right to have sex with a goat if you do it according to these laws, these rules. You think, God damn, that's insane. Never mind the cultural difference. It's insane. But then, see, somebody could say, wait a minute, that's very quick of you to say that's insane, because do you realize that there are X number of millions of people, hundreds of million people who followed that man? No. Are you going to say that all of those people, some of the clothes you're wearing, look where it's made, etc. Some of the food you eat is imported. Are you going to say that all those people are just insane? You understand the point is, then a sophisticated person can almost be talked out of it. Like, okay, I guess I was being nice and I guess I was being colloquial in my speech to say they're insane because you're right. But you got to admit, they're so, quote, culturally removed from our norm that it almost appears insane. Another person, a sophisticated person, would say, well, that's more like it. You're not a hothead after all. And you think, well, okay, I am a progressive, decent person. Any way you look at it, something that diverse from our norm, right here today, is insane. And yet they can't describe it. And I'm using an easy one. You may think it was harder by me throwing in and muddying up the waters with cultural differences. I know that other people, the real definition of insanity that they would want to use if somebody was seeing here an ordinary person and responding to me, they would want to say, well, let's get more to the real area of insanity. People who do believe they're hearing voices. Real nutso stuff, right? Okay. Same answer. You hear voices. Freud heard voices. Well, yes, but he heard his own voice of reason and analysis and pondering the human condition, studying the data he had taken. Yeah. Plus his voices matched the majority. The majority of the voices heard in Vienna at the turn of the century, in the early part of this century. There were people out on the street hearing voices. Think about it. But when he needed new fodder for his data, he would say, go out and give me some of those people, that guy on the corner that's always hollering that he's hearing voices. Bring him up here. I need to do some checking here to do some more information for my latest book. So they bring a guy who hears voices. Freud heard voices. But Freud heard voices that were in the majority. That is, out of the 100,000 signals coming in to Mr. Freud at such and such address in Vienna at such and such time, the 2.5 that he, at any particular time, could process generally fit into the norm of that time and place. He was getting the same signals as the guy downstairs that's talking to his dead mother. You are getting the same signals to your brain that the biggest fruitcake, to use technical terminology, out on the street right now. Somebody deranged, with a capital D. Somebody hearing voices. Somebody that believes that they're talking to God. Somebody that believes that they Every night fly home to Venus. I mean, what else do you want? People who are afraid of doors. Not just out of doors or indoors, but doors. And you go, Jesus, that's nuts. No, it's not. Or you can say, boy, it's apropos that guy says that he's from another planet, because him talking about that he's God's son or he's God's stepfather, he might as well be from another planet. Yeah. In other words, the insinuation being that, hey, that is so foreign that doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, it does. It makes so much sense that people can diagnose it as making no sense. That people can do what the part I just played and go, God damn, those people are crazy. They're not crazy. They're processing out of 100,000 signals coming in at any given time. You're getting the same signals that guy is, but you're not processing the two that he is. That's insanity. And it shifts. That's the only reason that people can diagnose insanity. That's the only way it can be defined by anybody anywhere. Because we could be in this other country that I was talking about, wherein it was all right to engage in amorous, I shouldn't call it amorous, I guess, erotic affairs with barnyard animals, as long as you do it correctly. And you hear, do you realize in America people have farm animals and they never go to bed with them? And they'd go, I knew those Americans were idiots. They're crazy. Why don't they? I mean, they don't have sex? Well, sure they have sex. And some of them are out on farms and they don't. Well, yeah. Well, do they have an explanation? Well, some of them said that God told them not to, that it was immoral. And they'd slap their little turban heads and go, those Americans are insane. Are they insane or what? And then they'll go, what? You understand? Insanity does not exist. Now, I know brain damage exists and all that and et cetera. And I know we're all going to die, so much for our medical update. But insanity cannot be diagnosed to fit anyone's agenda, to satisfy anyone, for one reason, because insanity does not exist. What you have is the physical, selective processing of incoming signals of which everyone are getting the same. This planet is the one sending out the signals. This keeps popping up in case, I don't want to throw you guys, it is just, we're back to point blank reality since this is our special Thursday night here in the middle of Thanksgiving and 4th of July. It keeps popping up, this feeling. And it pops up, I was going to get to, about these states of so-called extraordinary consciousness where people go, I feel like I'm one with the universe. And even those that do not seem to be that mystical, the poets, the great literature throughout the ages is replete. I was afraid you were going to say that, but it's better than plummet. It's replete with references that, I am every man. I am everybody. And they always do it. They throw it into poetry, and usually the guys wear berets or they look intelligent. And it kind of, gets by and they go, well, sometimes the guy has little mystical fits. And plus they make it try to sound moralistic, humane, like, well, I am my fellow man. Or one of the ones in Western literature is, there is nothing, however the hell it goes, there's nothing humans do. There's nothing human that goes on that is foreign to me. That, I am every man. But you could say, well, are you crazy? If you grabbed the gun, he'd go, well, I didn't mean that. Jesus, it's a metaphor. What I meant was, with decent people, it's like, say I was brought up a Presbyterian. It's that I do not any longer, since I've studied and gone to school and traveled the world, I no longer feel that Catholics or Jews or Muslims are foreign to me, that they're infidels. I no longer feel I'm Irish. I no longer feel that the British, that the French, I do not feel like there's some sort of horned devils. I understand that we are man. Or nowadays, bring up to date, we're here on this spaceship Earth together. This fragile little homeland, and we're all here together in the same little rowboat. And you go, well, you're including, people that hear voices and, crackpots. And the guy'd go, come on. You're running literature. You're running the arts. I don't mean that. No. Yes, he does. He's just not smart enough to know it. Where does he think he got the part to say what he said? He got out of the same 100,000 or million signals coming in. The Earth sends out the signals. That's as far as I care to go tonight. I mean, here's the man's little feet. Every man's feet. I know I did it all like this, but there's his little feet, okay? But right under his little feetsies is this little orb known as the Big E. And it's sending out these signals. It's sending out at any given time on the frequency of the human nervous system 100,000. Sending them out. If you've got a receiver that's not seriously damaged, that is, that you do not have a tumor the size of my heart. Well, no, let's make it something meaningful. The size of your foot. Then you are getting the same 100,000 signals as everybody else on this planet. One more time, and because this is never of any great account, I don't know why I keep backing up for you. We're talking about just the average, sane, by their definition, ordinary person. We're not talking about people with actual brain damage. Just ordinary people. I don't care if they call them insane, as long as they don't have brain damage or their nervous system not damaged. Everyone's getting the same 100,000 signals. That's all there is, folks. I mean, if you believe otherwise, then I guess you are exempt from my definition of insane, because you're insane on another level. No, you're not. You're extremely stupid. Everybody's getting the same signals. Insanity, and I'm going to get to the other two, of ordinary consciousness and extraordinary, it's a matter of which ones you're processing. That's why they cannot define insanity. That was the part I know it got extremely subtle for those of you that have an old English dictionary. It gets extremely subtle of me trying to describe my fictitious guy to begin with when I said they could not actually define or describe insanity, because they attribute it to the person or the person's life or the influences on the person. You understand, it's all localized to the person. It's not. It's universal. But they take insanity as being an anomaly. My first description was better. They take it as being local. That is, insanity is not sweeping us all, right? And all the psychiatrists, all the sane people, everybody that takes psychology today, they'll go, well, certainly not. I like to read about insane people and people with problems because it, as they always like to say, learning something about other strange people, after all, and including learning about trees and rocks and animals, eventually tells us more about ourselves. Man's been saying that for now 3,000 years. A little theatrical sarcasm there during a lull in the proceedings. They attribute, they try to diagnose by, they try to come to conclusions via a local example of one guy. That, all right, if he is insane, and we all decide, if we're ordinary people, we bring him out and he says, yes, I live on Venus. Not during the day, but I have to go back there every night. And he says something, and you go, well, and the man insists, yeah, it's true. So we say, is the man insane? And we all have to go, yes. We don't know why yet, but he is insane. What you have done is localize insanity. Now, an ordinary person says, I don't get the point. The sentence makes linguistic sense, grammatical sense. But we have localized insanity and said it was him. But if you do that, which they have to, it's the only way they can even talk about it, you cannot then define it in any manner. And the reason you cannot define it is because by their own definition, without them knowing it, by their own scientific data of, we have millions of signals coming in that we do not, or we cannot process. We just process some. We are all insane. You're as nuts as that guy, if he's nuts. You're just processing selectively. And of course, that's not under your control. We'll get to that in a minute. Please don't. Maybe I shouldn't. He is no more insane than you are. But insanity from any local epoch or area on this planet at any given time, sanity, this is no great secret, it's what the majority says it is. Ordinary people said that before, then they don't know what to do with it. Somebody says that of national renown about every 50 years on this planet. Somebody goes, wait a minute. The only thing that reality is, sane reality, is whatever everybody says it is. And the guy immediately writes a book. And if it's been a generation or so and somebody forgot about it, people go, God, what a major mystical breakthrough. The insanity is simply the selective processing of 2 or 3 signals at one time, but constantly within a given area. And you do know that you keep thinking, processing the same thoughts over and over, don't you? God, I didn't mean to shock everybody. Well, don't look so sad. At least it shows you're sane. Put technically, you keep thinking the same crap over and over and over and over. I mean, at least it sounds like, well, you're exaggerating to say that people are only processing 2.5 of the signals out of 100,000. I'm exaggerating? I told you, I'm being charitable. All right, at any given time, you're processing 2.5. Well, I'll speak up for ordinary people. They go, yeah, maybe at any given time, but over a period of time, think about how, processing 2.5 over here, and then a second later, 2 more 0.5. Hey, that adds up, yeah. Ordinary person, I don't know. Hell, it might add up to God knows. I don't know, 20 maybe. We're talking about over a lifetime. All right, 50. Actual 50 different things, 50 different signals that they actually, But then you got to remember, half the 50 they reject as being untrue, improper. The reason they cannot, we'll have to move on here, folks. The reason that insanity cannot be defined is because everyone, including those defining it, are insane. That is, they are receiving in their system the same signals that they're adjudicating as being insane, with this guy saying, I fly to other planets at night, I live on Mars. And you go, that's insane, I've never thought that. I know. You don't know that you ever thought that. But the only way you say it's insane is, it makes sense. No, it's not true. No, I don't believe that. If it was truly insane, by their own definition of insanity, if they could go up with it, an insane person would come out and say, all right, here's our proof for the night. Here's an insane person. Wait till you hear this. Where do you live? And the guy goes, all right, to show the difference, could you give us a short breakdown of, to you, what represents the bedrock of reality? The human being, that is insane because no one would understand it. That's just noise. But you understand when a guy says, yes, I live on Venus and go there every night. Now, if you're sane and you're processing what the majority is processing, those 20 or 50, then you are sane. But the only way that you know that that's insane is that's not foreign to you. You're getting the same signals. That's the only way you can say, well, that's insane. Because if it was truly insane, it would sound like gibberish. It would be gibberish. But life does not send out gibberish signals. I'm sorry. If you're getting gibberish signals, then it's something else. You actually have, by the way, physical brain damage. Your receiver, literally, is harmed. And the voices you hear, this is meaningless because there's nothing to say to people that's actually damaged. But it would be gibberish, literally. But then nobody would hold you responsible. If somebody did come out, if they brought in a person and says, this is my son, we've had him out on the farm, he's now 12, and we think something's wrong with him, and he just speaks in gibberish, the psychiatrist, the psychologist at first, that you bring in to see him for the first time, there'd be no doubt. They wouldn't start giving a whole bunch of tests. They'd immediately call in a neurologist because they'd know, well, is that all he's done? Yeah, he's been talking gibberish ever since he started. They wouldn't bother with tests. They wouldn't say, well, did you people get divorced? Did you have a deprived childhood? If he's actually speaking gibberish, he's not insane. They know he's sick. They know it. Yeah. Which if you begin to understand my kinds of, quote, evidence, there's the operational proof. They wouldn't see it. But that's why other people that say that they talk to flying saucers or live on Venus. They're not insane because you can understand what they say. Oh, you say it's insane, but you can understand it. If it was truly insane, it'd be gibberish because it would be brain damage, and there'd be no doubt. Nobody would worry about giving them a test or what happened to their childhood. They know there's physical damage to the nervous system. The ordinary signals that the planet is sending out indirectly, but the ordinary, his receiver is damaged, and he's not getting them. What if? That's insanity. What if? I don't know which one to do. 17 minutes. The ordinary or the extraordinary? How about the extraordinary? Is actually pretty easy if you take what I just described. The extraordinary is, Which one is most fun, the extraordinary or the ordinary? The extraordinary, how about, we divide it up, 7 minutes apiece. We'll be fair. 8 minutes apiece. What's half of 147? Okay. How about those who are interested in so-called mysticism and extraordinary states of consciousness? Could I submit to you that it's as nebulous, tenuous, non-operative an effort has been going on historically for men to describe that as it was to describe insanity? Of course, there's any ordinary people here, they might go, there's probably a secret message there. No one can describe extraordinary states of consciousness. They'll try, but even they admit, the same that psychiatrists will admit, hey, we cannot absolutely define insanity. We cannot. I'll admit it. I'm the world's leading psychiatrist, and I cannot tell you with a straight face that we can define it. The world's greatest mystic, whoever it was for his life, he'd say, I know all about it. I know every stage, everything you've ever read, from Buddha to all the Hindu mystics. I know exactly from personal experience. And I've tried to even write about it. I tried to write the booklet. No, not the one about goats, but this other one. But I'm going to tell you the truth. I gave it my best shot, and I still didn't describe it correctly. Does anybody? We don't think about any possible connection. Yes, we do. There's every possible connection in the world. It's the same thing. They cannot describe extraordinary states of consciousness, but then they attribute it. There's a similarity as always, if you jump back, comparing psychiatry, trying to establish locally that this one guy's insane because of these and these possibilities. But we're not sure what, we're not sure what combinations. The same way people try to describe that's had it. Those who've not had it don't really write about it much. It's just speculation. But anyway, they're not very interested. But those who have had the kind of experience try to write about it. And they admit, I don't know how to describe it because it's so extraordinary, but then they localize it after it's over. That is, they got no choice. They localize it generally on the basis of an external force. They won't call it God normally. But what they're saying is, I cannot describe what happened any more than an insane person can say, hey, yeah, I'm insane, but I'll tell you exactly how I got to be insane. You know they can't. Not from an ordinary view. Not to satisfy an ordinary mind. Not to even satisfy themselves. Same way, the so-called mystics, people who've had an extraordinary state, experience of consciousness, cannot describe it and will admit it. Give it their best shot and then say what I have just described is sorely lacking. But they attribute it to, and you would normally assume so. You buy the story immediately if you're interested in such as that, and we're reading it and pursuing it in sort of a second-handed manner of a dilettante at one time. It just strikes you, yeah, you're right. Because if it's that extraordinary, it can't be something you just say, well, I'll tell you exactly how to have a mystical experience, how to have an extraordinary state of consciousness, and in case you don't go to trouble, I'll describe exactly what it is. You know, it'll be like a movie or read a book, and you read the book, and then you decide. You can probably vicariously get as much out of it as you do physical people watching a football game and being able to sit on the couch and or a boxing match. That you can get that same kind of thing. It would seem so, but even they say, it doesn't work. Well, why? And then they attribute it to, it is so beyond the human experience. It is so extraterrestrial, extra mortal, that it cannot be described. What if, as I'm suggesting what insanity is, it's this, that everybody's a damn mystic. Everybody has an extended state of consciousness in the same way that everybody's insane. It is simply out of the 100,000 signals coming in constantly, sometimes people suddenly begin to process some that they never have. If we had a real good, sane person here, they might go, wait a minute. That even seems to tie together the possibility of insanity and mystical experiences even more than you did 3 or 4 minutes ago when you stopped and said, wait a minute, when I tried to weasel out of it. Now it sounds like even more. No, same basis. What if extraordinary states of consciousness are no more, literally, than you processing? And I say you processing, men apparently have the same control over it as people do to be insane. The people who are now considered to be insane, did they at one time sit around or when they were young think, what I want to do is grow up to be insane. You know, and I'll try real hard, and then finally they begin to have insane experiences, and they think, boy, success. It just seems to happen. If they would tell you the truth, these people that normally have had in the past, or who even claim to now to have it, well, I don't have anything to prove because enough of you have had it happen. The truth is, unless you have now fallen into some great cosmic, black theological imaginary hole, if I said, well, what brings it on? Starts with an L. And it doesn't mean Lunsford or lug wrench. Luck. In the same way you ask an insane man, how did you get to be insane? He thinks, well, I'm just lucky. I am processing different information. But the majority tells me I'm nuts. The only reason they know you're nuts, sir, the only reason they can say that is because they know it's not nuts. They're getting the same signals, but they're processing different ones. They're too busy. They're too busy being sane, middle class, wearing suits, being decent, supporting the world, having ordinary sane thoughts. They're too sane, and they're just too busy to go ahead and process the things about, well, let's see, did I miss the last flight to Venus tonight? Will I get stuck here in Detroit again overnight for the weekend? They got the same signals coming in, but they're just too busy. What if extraordinary states of consciousness, instead of all this peering and, the gods have spoken to me, and boy, I earned this. I tortured myself, and I did all this and that, which you've got to, if you're ordinary. You've got to go through some procedure. You've got to take up some kind of practice of sitting, meditating, fasting, studying some great teacher's work. You've got to, and if you're lucky, it happens. But it's not that much different. You're insane. They say you're insane, and you realize, well, I'm out of stuff with everybody else up here. I need help. I'll undergo psychiatric analysis. I'll read books. I'll take drugs. You can do all that, and it won't do a damn bit of good. If you get any better, it's what? Luck. God damn, they sound similar, don't they? I don't know if you're crazy. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it. If you're stupid, they do. They're very similar. They're similar on this basis, the signals. I'm telling you, the 1 million are my charitable figure. 100,000 signals are coming out of this planet. They're going to other places, trees and rocks and animals, but the ones to the human nervous system, you're talking about in excess of 100,000 running through you right now. The earth is sending it out, and you're only right now, you know it. How many are you processing right now? Again, I was being charitable going all this 2.5. How about 2, except those of you whose eyes are beginning to glass over and sometimes you want to doze off and you didn't sleep enough and it's too hot and you ate too much, you didn't eat enough. I mean, operating at optimum speed, what are you doing? Maybe 2. Try it right now. Can you think of 2 things right now? Simultaneously. Well, most of you can do about like a boxer. Well, yeah, I'm almost doing 2 at one time. It's like I'm almost on one foot and then, Be on those 2, no matter how great they are, or no matter how insane they are, you're talking about way over, hundreds of thousands more are still pumping in. They're right in there in the same way. There's not speculation. They're there. Some of them are just insane. If you're an ordinary person, I said, right now, don't you ever have daydreams that you might have come from another planet? And somebody, I'm sure most of you was the truth, and you go, well, yeah, I'll hear somebody say it in a movie or something, I think, hey, maybe I was. But, it's insane. You just dismiss it immediately. But it was there. Well, yeah, but I heard it in a movie. I mean, it just made me think it. Well, where the hell do you think that came from? And what are they doing? Importing movies from another, dimension? That's the same way as people, blaming all of human behavior on TV. Well, where the Yeah, but people didn't act this way before we had TV. I mean, what was it? From another universe, suddenly this horrible-looking rocket came in, and what was in it? Not this huge monster, It was a TV network or something. At any rate, you are processing different information. I can't resist going in the ordinary because it's so ordinary. But it touches both sides of that. You might look at the insane as being one side of a triumvirate of my 3 of the insane and the normal, or the ordinary and the extraordinary. But in the middle, it touches both of them. If you want to look at it spatially. And if you look at it this way, even though people academically study insanity and study transcendental experience hardly anybody studies normalcy. I mean, they think, well, if you're normal, you don't study it. But that's where it's really interesting, in a sense. What do the normal, how do they take life? How is one way to know that you are normal and sane? I'll answer it for you since we're running out of time, is that you take life personally. Insane people may not. That's one of the signs of insanity. If a guy's standing on a street corner and it's freezing and he's in a pair of boxer shorts, and he's looking up and he's talking to somebody, and a policeman comes along or a social worker and says, "Aren't you cold?" The guy says, "When you're the first son of the Queen of Venus, you never get cold. You're warmed by the forces, the creative forces of the universe." Well, besides the talk, you know the guy's nuts. He's not taking himself personally. I mean, you can look, he's beginning to develop frostbite, and he doesn't even seem aware of it. I mean, he's obviously nuts. Now, besides such physical things, how can people do this? If you're ordinary, this would sound like an attack on something, but this is normal. This is normal. It's not an attack on somebody. It's certainly not an attack. I was going to pull out a religious example. But inside a context, it's not fanaticism of any sort, but that people say. And people say it under conditions that apparently are extremely passionate. An interview. A person describing. That they realize the magnificence of life, the importance of cherishing life, the importance of being reminded that there are higher forces, higher purposes in life than simply filling one's belly, getting rich, and etc. Because 2 years ago, this month, when I was on the expedition, and we were up in the high Rockies, southern Montana, as I tripped and was falling down that mountain and thought that was the end of me, and I hit, and I woke and realized I was still alive, and I thought, there is a God. Now see, don't jump to sarcasm yet. I'm pulling in a whole lot of things at one time. If you were an ordinary sarcastic person, if we were critiquing that and saying, well, that's not really ordinary. Yes, it is. It's exemplary of a sane person. But right quick, you could say, but how in the hell can somebody say, after I tripped and fell and broke about 2/3 of the bones of my body, and I still can hardly get around, but as I awoke and realized I'm not dead, I thought, thank you, God. And you think, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Well, you see the obvious, because if you were a non-religious person and you thought that the whole point of this was some notation on religion, you'd go, what kind of God is that? How do you let you... What do you mean you fell? You were in this horrible car wreck and it killed everybody but you? And you went, well, thank you, God. There is a God. You know what that is? That's not insanity. It's not a notation of the fanaticism of religion. That is sanity. Because they have confined, they have limited their perception of the universe down to the point that they have to take everything, or they do take everything personally. When I fell down this mountain, and that some way though, out of all the mountains on this planet, in the second week of June, 1991, not just in Montana, not just the Rocky Mountains, all over the world, out of all the people who were falling off curves, people who were having heart attacks, God stopped and looked, and there as I fell, He did not let me die, and it made me realize I had a job to do in life. We all have something to do with this life. We should cherish it. Unless you think, wait a minute, this is some kind of idiocy. If there's a God the way you're talking about now, why the hell did He let you fall? What did you ever do? Why are they falling all over the world? No. You're missing it. But do you understand the reason I'm going through that is, it would be quite within sane reason, if you're not involved with this, to go, that is nuts. And that makes me fear for the intellectual progress of humanity, that people still believe that. Or they'll say, well, yes, there we were on our way home from church, from the synagogue, and a drunk driver ran over, hit our car, killed 6 other people, and God spared me. And you think, wait a minute. You understand? Because you're saying, well, that's nuts. That doesn't prove anything. Yes, it does. It proves they're sane. Because they are confining their perception of life down to the sane level. Although if you're not involved with their particular sanity, you can say, well, that is nuts. That you could say, well, wait a minute. That's a great attack. That's a perfect condemnation of religion. That idiots believe that kind of stuff. I mean, if God's looking after them, why do you let them have a wreck? Yeah. Not just anybody. They admit it. They're on their way home from church. And a drunk driver hit them head on. What, are these people crazy? No. They're not insane. I could give you a description of insanity, the guy that survived, but I won't. I'm talking about serious insanity. No. Sanity is being able to take the severely limited number of signals that you process and keep it at a personal level. Because that is why, or another aspect of why everyone has to tell their life story. Why you're always trying to tell what kind of guy you are. Why egoism, not as being an area worthy of attack, but why it's important for people to be all puffed up. I mean, people know they don't amount to shit. And therefore you got to act some kind of way. I mean, what the hell? How are you going to get along in this life when you realize, I'm nothing. Bad, but you got to tell what kind of guy you are, because what you're dealing with, and I'm going to say people know it, and of course they don't know it consciously, but they know that there's more going on in life than I can deal with. That's a fair statement. They also know without knowing it, and will never know it, my brain is getting many, hundreds of thousands of more signals constantly, momentarily, instantly, than I process. And if you knew that, if you actually knew that for a fact, that would almost spook you. You'd almost go, well, Jesus, now I don't know what to do next. Yes, you do. That's why you have a name. That's why you feel like, wait a minute, God's looking after me. Or conversely, you can think, well, God's got it in for me. It's the same thing. You have to take the limited processing of information coming in to the brain, not the body, directly to the brain, that you're only doing 2.5 out of 100,000. And you have to deal with that. And the way you deal with it is you limit the universe, existence itself, into a personal affair. When I awoke there at the bottom of the canyon, broken and bruised, I'll admit, but I looked up. I couldn't move, but I thought, thank you, God. That's not insane. That is sanity. It's not being very conscious. Keep processing those signals, and I want to thank the producers again for bringing us all together.